What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from He the Spirit, presented to you by NoleGameday.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday afternoon, and we have a lot to talk about this. I keep saying I got to find a different word. Since we're doing this in the afternoons, I got to find a better word for evening. It's not evening anymore. And we didn't do a noon show, so it's 1 o'clock. I just got to figure it out. But we've got a lot to discuss on this afternoon's show. We're going to talk about the transfers leaving Florida State, some finding a new home already, a total of 8 so far, leaving Tallahassee. We're going to talk about a former FSU quarterback visiting an SEC school. And then we're going to talk about a pair of offers that Florida State has put out, one of them that has already been practically rejected, and maybe another one, too, that's practically rejected as well. And then you've also got a cornerback coming to visit the Seminoles as well. And then we're going to finish it off with some NFL draft and the latest on the basketball side. But with me this afternoon is Austin Veazey, our lead basketball writer at NoleGameday.com. And over to the other side is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Good to be back for another week. But, yeah, I mean, we got the NFL draft coming up here shortly. It's going to go over the weekend. And then after that, the long off season really begins here, and we'll be, trying to do anything we can to speed up that time to get to August.
And not even just the weekend. It starts tomorrow. I feel like this is earlier than it usually is for the NFL draft, but I'm excited for it. NFL draft time is always one of my favorite times of the year, and even if AZ and Farmer likely going to be the only two guys drafted, I'm excited to see where they go.
It's going to be very interesting. We'll talk about some projections for them later on in this episode, but I'm right there with you guys. I love the NFL draft, just seeing where these guys go and project, and definitely for at least two of us on here being really big fans of our teams, interested to see. I swear Mike Tomlin don't even play games about Shedeur Sanders to the Steelers. I swear I'm getting tired of all this. Just play Mason Rudolph at this point. Tired of Aaron Rodgers.
Get ready to learn Tyler Shuck, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, goodness gracious. So it's going to be very entertaining. We'll talk a lot more about that later on in the show. But first, before we get started, obviously, some tragic stuff happening last week. We had our show earlier in the week, but just wanted to give our thoughts, prayers to everybody that were affected by such a travesty of a situation there on FSU's campus. I want to give a shout out to law enforcement, the first responders too, as well, that did a fantastic job of getting on scene as quickly as possible. And those two at TMH, also, although, regional hospital there, a lot of people put in a ton of work to try to do their best to take care of these people that were affected by it. But certainly a rather, I know they just had a baseball game yesterday, and, it took a little while for baseball to get going there, but I think a lot of students getting on campus, it's tough. It might take a little bit of while, but I've been proud to see how the FSU administration, President McCullough, how they've been able to just allow for students. It's a big mental thing too for them, but just to allow a lot of flexibility for them on campus tests. I know big exams are coming up as well. We also have 2 students with us at NoleGameday.com as well. And so it was just definitely a scary scene, and wishing the best and a full recovery for those affected. All right, let's jump into some transfers, gentlemen, because after that incident happened, Florida State shut down a lot of their athletics, and including that, Florida State wrapped up their spring practices, and Florida State has already seen a lot of attrition hit the portal quickly from its roster. And we noted on this one beforehand, Jalen Early, he's found a new home. He's heading to Missouri, headed to the SEC. Best of luck to him. But let's go down a list here, and we'll pinpoint a few that we would like to go further into discussing. We've got junior wide receiver Jordan Scott, another wide receiver entering the transfer portal here, which we're about to discuss a lot of, with another one being former 5-star wide receiver Hakeem Williams, who just most recently actually visited Colorado, which is going to be a funny discussion there after a post that he put out on social media with a shot towards Travis Hunter not too long ago. Then redshirt sophomore Jalen Brown, he did not hit the transfer portal. He was actually dismissed from the team after a third-degree felony charge. And then you've got Aaron Hester entering the transfer portal, TJ Ferguson, Florida State offensive lineman, and redshirt freshman defensive lineman Nas White. Who should we start off first with?
Well, I think you've got to start at the wide receivers, right? I mean, the amount of attrition that Florida State is dealing with there now is it's crazy. A little bit unexpected to see some of these departures. Obviously, Jordan Scott just signed with Florida State in December, and after a spring with the program, he's headed out the door. We heard some pretty promising things about Jaylen Brown at different points of the spring, and now he's no longer a member of the team. And then Hakeem Williams, all that potential injuries feel like really robbed him of some opportunities at Florida State over the past couple of years. And once again, I can't remember who it was last week or the week before that we were talking about it, but Hakeem suffered a injury in the spring that knocked him out for the remainder of practice. So now when you look at it, I mean, Florida State, 11 wide receivers remaining on the roster, only 2 are upperclassmen, and those guys just got here in January, and Squirrel White and Deuce Robinson. And then outside of that, your most experienced returning wide receiver is Lowain McCoy going into his second year at Florida State. No one on the roster has played more than one season in Tallahassee. And Lowain McCoy only 54 receiving yards to his name. So, I mean, now you look at it, there's still some young talent, some potential there, but it feels like Florida State really needs something in this transfer portal to kind of fill the gap here as we go into this 2025 season. Heard some decent things about McCoy. He dealt with some injuries. Obviously, Javon Boggs has come in and really impressed as a true freshman, but I mean, there are some major question marks there now when we're talking about Florida State trying to rejuvenate a passing attack that was a major disappointment in 2024.
And it's not like we didn't have questions coming into the spring about that wide receiver group anyways, and to lose, even we can call them some of your more productive wide receivers, but they didn't really produce last year. I mean, I've been off the Hakeem Williams train for over a year now, as much as Logan didn't want me to be, but with injuries and Ron Dugans as his coach for 2 years, he really didn't stand a chance. And, Jaylen Brown, he was supposed to be the speedy deep threat, but with the quarterback situation, the offensive line play that Florida State had last year, we never really got a chance to see it. We saw some poor effort from him at times. I don't even think we saw him for the last, 4 or 5 games of the season last year. So on one hand, yeah, you're losing 3 guys, one of which was on campus for all of 2 months. But at the same time, I'm not going to be really too upset about it if they can find some more productive guys in the spring portal window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was muted whenever Dustin was talking about Hakeem Williams and going to the factors of what may have led him to the transfer portal. I also added in drops in there. Injuries certainly, but inconsistencies was an issue as well. And as alluded to from both of you guys, practically with Ron Dugans, things weren't clicking in a lot of different ways. And one thing is development and getting guys going in that wide receiver room. Johnny Wilson helped play a part of keeping Ron Dugans and having that job for him. Keon Coleman, a massive one as well. But for Hakeem, things just could not get going. And that injury, once again, and can't stay healthy, but an injury like this and a pivotal part in a pivotal spring camp for him, which I thought was a pivotal one last year, just could not stay healthy enough, and one that sidelined him this spring. I mean, it just hurts you definitely when you're starting to hear guys that are newcomers or some younger guys getting more buzz, or like Javon Boggs, like Dustin was just talking about, a guy that now you're kind of starting to wonder, is that a projected starter as a true freshman, coming in, and someone that Mike Norvell has talked highly of consistently throughout this past spring. And then when you go over to Jaylen Brown, I had been hearing issues since upon arrival. I mean, even going back to LSU of, not making sure that he's staying dialed into the program and the message, and making sure off the field things are not continuing. And that just didn't happen to be the case. And this wasn't a first time deal thing for Jaylen. Not saying that what happened to him most recently this last Saturday has happened before, but there has been instances where the program would have liked to see him focused in a better direction. And that's just, it all compiled up, and that was your last chance there. And that's why Florida State made an immediate dismissal of Jaylen Brown on that roster. And Jordan Scott, I mean, don't know what maybe was happening there for him, but whenever you have some other guys stepping in, you have, your expected starters with Squirrel White and Deuce Robinson coming in, then you've got a youngster like we were just talking about with Javon Boggs. It makes you think some things of where you probably are going to get your next opportunity. And it might not be at Florida State with the amount of playing time, just how Gus Malzahn runs this offense. You're not going to see a whole ton of rotation like you saw in years past under Mike Norvell and that offense, which I'm kind of happy about, but it makes it to where there's not going to be a whole lot of guys going in and out throughout games on a week-to-week basis. And but yeah, I mean, I think you look at the wide receiver room and the transfer portal for sure. But if Brown was going to continue to do that, continue to go that route, you don't want that in your locker room. And then for Hakeem Williams, just can't stay healthy. There's not enough development. There's not enough consistency of catching the ball. That's my take on that wide receiver room currently for Florida State.
They need some bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They need some bodies. And, I know we're going to get to the 2 offers that they put out, but, it really doesn't look like Florida State is going to have a chance to, well, one of them's already off the board. Doesn't look like they're going to have a chance to land the guy from BYU either. And I mean, this is the problem when you get to the spring window. There's still guys hopping in, but not as many, probably not as much talent as there is in December when there's much more of a mass exodus across the country. And I think in the spring, you have to pony up with the NIL more because there's less guys, more schools are trying to bring in these guys. And as we've seen, the first visit is really what matters in a lot of these transfer recruitments. And obviously the incident last weekend kind of limited Florida State there from being able to bring in transfer prospects, but you're hoping to see some movement on that front this week.
Let's jump over to Aaron Hester, someone that we started to see jumps from a little bit there last year in some regard. I don't think any of us on here were expecting to see such a big presence from him going into this season, and that's saying a lot just because of how much time he spent in Tallahassee being a redshirt junior. I personally always wanted him to try out and test out the linebacker room. I don't know if that had ever been fully discussed with Adam Fuller, or they just didn't see that was going to be the right fit. I always thought he was an undersized defensive end, but a legacy guy. And he's decided to enter the transfer portal and going over to redshirt freshman Nas White, leaving. I wonder if that has to do with the scheme and, maybe also to some other guys, stepping up or impressing and expected to get more playing time being this new scheme that Tony White is going to be running this upcoming season.
Yeah, I don't think that these are necessarily 2 massive hits for Florida State's defense, but it is disappointing to see another legacy not work out in Tallahassee. And Aaron Hester, a reserve for most of his time, was kind of in the back end of the rotation in 2024. And as another guy, where injuries, really limited his time at Florida State. And we saw him sporting that knee brace, for about the past 3 years or so. But you look at it recently and, Julian Armella, Lamont Green Jr., for whatever reason, those legacies just haven't worked out for Florida State. So, you would hope that they're able to flip that maybe with a guy like Deuce Robinson here in 2025. But, as for Nas White, signed with FSU as a late addition in that 2024 class, chose FSU over Miami and Tennessee. And, I'll say the same thing I said about Aaron Hester and Hakeem Williams. Nas White came in, he enrolled last summer, suffered an injury in fall camp, and then, was basically limited for the entirety of that true freshman campaign, made one appearance, but, another one where injuries kind of derailed the early part of his career, messed up that redshirt season. And we saw what Florida State did on the defensive line this offseason, going back to the high school ranks, junior college ranks, a transfer portal, to really reinforce that unit. And it seemed like it'd be an uphill climb for a guy like Nas White during playing time.
Yeah, we knew Florida State had to cut some dead weight off this roster because they were over the roster limit, I believe, right, Dustin?
Yep, under it now.
Yeah, so they had to cut some bodies, and I don't think either that these guys are going to play very much this upcoming season, and probably not for the foreseeable future. In the case of Aaron Hester, who's, like you mentioned, he's a redshirt junior. If he hasn't been able to get on the field by now, when is he going to get on the field? So get rid of these guys, let him go get some more opportunities, and see if you can find some better players to fill those spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think to me, like I was just saying, Aaron Hester, I think he can go find an opportunity somewhere else. I just did not see where that was going to be somewhere where he was going to jump in and be even maybe in the two deep this upcoming season. But there was a lot of transfers, though, that Florida State brought in the defensive end room and the edge room specifically, to where it was, once again, he was going to have to compete very hard in order to try to even get close to a starting spot. So I think an opportunity elsewhere is best for him and his career. And Nas White, I mean, I didn't see much from him. And, like I said, gotta make some room. There's got to be attrition in this roster, and that's where that comes down to play for him. And he's got a young career, so best of luck to him. And then going over to the offensive line, Florida State losing TJ Ferguson, former Alabama transfer. He's smiling, so I'm gonna let him have the floor here. He's smiling. He's got something to say.
Good riddance. He was quite literally. No, don't do this. He was quite literally the worst graded interior offensive lineman in college football last year. Across guards and centers, he was dead last on PFF. Goodbye. Have fun.
Hate to sound like a broken record. TJ Ferguson suffered an injury during Florida State's fall camp. Yep, down there.
That's what it was.
Down there in Jacksonville, suffered an upper body injury that limited him for that entire 2024 campaign. Still did his best to be out there and try to contribute for Florida State. Made 11 appearances, 7 starts at left guard. But like you said, BZ, I mean, really struggled when he was out there. And, you have to wonder if he should have been out there on that field with the shape that he was in. And then once again, you get to the spring and he's still been trying to get back healthy from what he was dealing with last season. I think Mike Norvell said in either that last press conference he did, or maybe the one right before that Ferguson had finally been able to get back on the field and do a little bit for Florida State. But, you have to look at it, a redshirt senior, 1 season of eligibility remaining. This is a guy who's probably trying to have a guaranteed starting role going into that last season. And Florida State, I mean, still has, even with the departure of TJ Ferguson and, Jalen Early, redshirt junior, still have 7 redshirt seniors there along that offensive line in the room. So, I mean, not necessarily a guaranteed thing for Ferguson, especially, with the season that he's coming off of. But, now we're seeing him getting some interest from an SEC program in that portal.
Yeah. BZ, you think he had suckitis? That's what he's been dealing with?
Yeah, a little bit of that.
That's hard to.
He also had Alex Atkins as his coach, so it's hard to overcome it. So,
yeah, that was not helping you much there, I will say, and getting you any kind of medicine to treat that. But yeah, I mean, you brought in tons of transfers too as well, and we're hearing really good things about Andre Otto. He's a guy that's going to be always working on the inside as well. Adrian Medley they brought in from UCF to join in with Herb Hand and Gus Malzahn. So I don't think there's too much of a shock here to where Florida State is once again dealing with a player that is not recovering fully with injuries. I mean, this is not just a college thing. This happens also too in the NFL, and GMs will tell you. I mean, we hear from Jason Light all the time and Todd Bowles as well. They will call out players and say, you need to be healthy. You look at Jamel Dean, who's been a nice starter for the Buccaneers through his career, Super Bowl champion. But the one thing that hinders him a ton is injuries. And, you've got to keep your body healthy. You've got to make sure that you're making sure you're staying in shape, making sure you're doing your workouts, etc., doing your rehabs, all this kind of stuff. And it goes both ways, not in just collegiate, it goes NFL, all throughout. And some of these guys, as we're seeing a theme here, is that they cannot stay healthy. And a lot of it happens in the spring. And what happened there before, after the season, you just did not put in some of them. I'm not saying everybody, because maybe some have lingering issues, but we've seen some players though go into this spring that were dealing with injuries last year or had surgeries that we saw participate in this spring, and they're likely going to stay on this roster. But if it becomes a reoccurring situation, this is where the transfer portal comes in handy for a program.
And I will say, just real quick, offensive line, another position that I think Florida State needs to explore in that transfer portal, because, you did bring in some of those transfers, but obviously Gunnar Hansen, Micah Pettis missed a majority of that spring. Richie Leonard was still limited while recovering from that season-ending injury that he suffered in 2024. So, I mean, once again, there's a little bit of a concern here with the depth. If a guy like Hansen or Pettis is forced to go to the lineup, or even one of your guards, I mean, who do you have behind them in the 2 deep? And I'll say as well, Jacob Brizzi got knocked out for the spring and had to undergo a procedure at some point. And we saw last year, I mean, the way the injuries just decimated that offensive line. And I don't know if Florida State, if they have enough bodies once again, if that injury bug was to bite them, especially now with Ferguson and Early going out the door.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We're going to keep a close eye. Make sure you guys are staying tuned to NoleGameday.com. The guys are doing a fantastic job keeping everybody updated on the transfers going out. And as we move on, hit that like button. Thanks for hanging out with us this afternoon. We deeply do appreciate it. And if you do have any comments, question, topics that you guys would like us to discuss, simply throw it in the chat, and we'd love to bring it up here on the screen and jump into it. But if you're still here with us on YouTube, smack that like button. All right, let's jump over to some offers. Well, actually, real quick, I want to mention Trevor Jackson, former Florida State quarterback, most recently did enter the transfer portal, someone that I think a lot of FSU fans were wanting to see just because they would have actually asked for anybody to play out there at quarterback last season. I think I would have asked Dustin even. No, maybe not. That would have been more of like a DJU kind of situation there, just kind of stuck and can't move his leg. And yeah, that Achilles would have been over. It would have been a wrap. But a lot of people wanted to see Trevor Jackson just because he did wear number 5 last year, which was insane to me. I did not understand that one bit. But yeah, he is going to be visiting Arkansas. Trevor Jackson is visiting Arkansas SEC school there. I'm sure that he'll probably take a few more visits, but the Razorbacks have some interest in the former FSU quarterback. Let's jump over to Florida State making some offers too in the wide receiver room, like we were just talking about there. Also, we'll talk about a defender that's visiting here soon. But let's talk about BYU redshirt senior wide receiver Keenan Marion and San Jose State redshirt junior wide receiver Treshaun Hurry. Hurry actually, which was hilarious because I was putting together the live stream here for YouTube and had Hurry in the thumbnail. And as I'm doing that, he goes ahead and commits to Kentucky. So Florida State made that offer there, and he decides to go over there to the Wildcats. And then Marion.
Did he not commit to Louisville, or am I tripping?
I don't know. I thought it was Kentucky.
Well, Louisville is in Kentucky.
Same state.
We'll see.
Yes, he did go to Louisville. Louisville.
Maybe he put in there. Can't wait to be in Kentucky. Louisville there, and then first off, number one, let's just get to the point here. Who the hell are they? First off, number one, I know you got to look for depth. Who the hell are they? Number one. So
I told you, spring window. It's lacking. You don't have a Keon Coleman enter every year.
No, it's very rare for that to happen, to have another Keon Coleman situation. But just putting it out there. Sorry to not have all of my eggs in the basket here. Shout happy Easter to everybody. And then Marion announced that he's visiting Arizona State, Tennessee, Miami, and SMU. Florida State will not be getting a visit, at least for right now, not getting a visit from the star BYU wide receiver.
They're not going to visit. I mean, if he's already
there's no way he even makes it on all. There's no way he even makes it on all 4 visits that he has scheduled. I mean, a spring transfer to go on 4 visits is absurd.
Probably not. Yeah, if he doesn't have one scheduled to Florida State by now.
These lists look like some awesome visits. I was writing it down earlier. I was like, he just wants to travel. He just wants to have a good time. Just like Los came on here and he was like, man, I always knew I was going to Florida State, but I went to USC. I want to go to West Coast for the first time and enjoy it. Hell yeah, Arizona State. Absolutely. Tennessee. Get spoiled at the SEC. Miami, go down there. Beautiful time, beautiful weather. Go over to Dallas, SMU. Why not? Get some ribs, get some barbecue. Absolutely. I don't blame him.
Especially if he makes it for that 3rd or 4th visit to Miami or SMU. I mean, that's where the bag dropping begins. So
yeah.
We'll just have to see. But yeah, that one not likely for Florida State at the moment. And so far, not a ton of traction with wide receivers in the transfer portal. I know Mike Norvell recently did a network or an interview with the ACC network, and he kind of expressed some confidence about the wide receivers Florida State does have in that room currently. But I mean, man, you're banking on a lot of unproven guys to step up in a big way in 2025 right now. And, Squirrel White and Deuce Robinson were banged up at points of the spring as well.
I was just going to say, excuse me for not having a lot of confidence after last season, no matter what he says. So I'd rather add as much talent as possible.
Hey, you tweeted it. You put it out there on you already put it out here on the airwaves.
Yeah.
But over there on Twitter land, you put out you don't feel good about this offense.
I don't. And I get more and more negative as the weeks go by. By the time we start the season, it's going to be a 3-9 prediction from me.
I would say definitely my feelings of the offense are trending down compared to where they were at the beginning of spring. Just, the attrition in the wide receiver room, the constant injuries in that room, as well as along the offensive line. I don't know, man. Something just give me the heebie-jeebies about it.
I'm getting scared. I'm getting nervous. We're going to see another. Oh, my God. Can you imagine another season like last year of that offense? People, they just won't watch. Those ratings that FSU is going to be like, that they want to flex as much about numbers. I don't know how many people are going to be watching, because it's a rough watch.
Here's the issue. Florida State fans wouldn't watch, but everyone else would watch because they love
rivals
Florida
will love
State's
it.
terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. In-state rivals and whoever else that want to talk trash will absolutely watch it. But yeah, there's not a lot to be excited about. Definitely too, with missing some extra time in spring camp, and that doesn't help. And guys, there's 2 new coordinators. I know that not talking about the defense here, but a whole new coordinator is here trying to build a whole new offense with a new quarterback, with 2 new starting wide receivers, probably a third. These are 3 new wide receivers
and 4 new starting offensive linemen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
New starting tight end
that were limited in the spring. You couldn't build any chemistry with.
No bell cow running back.
This was we'll have, I think next week we'll maybe do more of a roundup of spring camp, but I think this was an awful.
Do we have to?
I think it was. Do it right now is an awful spring for the offensive side of the ball for Florida State. And we weren't hearing good things about the running game. Like, it wasn't even there. Man, there's a reason why they spent a lot of cash for Usman Krolma that they flipped from Georgia at the last minute. It's very underwhelming. And we didn't even I didn't hear one tidbit about Thomas Castellanos in the spring.
Not really.
Projected starting quarterback.
Not very often. You heard a lot about Kevin Sperry.
Absolutely. That's all we really heard about. We heard about maybe a few passes here from Brock Glenn, but ooh, Lordy, that was not a good spring for Florida State on the offensive side of the ball. You better hope Tony White can get some takeaways and get some pick sixes and fumble sixes, because it's just not looking pretty. It's not looking pretty. So we'll see what they do in the transfer portal. But this window, like Dustin was just saying, and this is not the window to be able to grab some excellent talent. And if there are going to be options, it's going to be very hard to compete with schools that are willing to pay a lot more than Florida State most certainly is going to try and do.
Yep.
So, but let's talk about a defender, though. We'll go to the defensive side here for Coach Surtain and Tony White's defense. A Houston cornerback Jeremiah Wilson is visiting Florida State. Any kind of info on this guy? I forgot. I didn't have down what year he is in college.
He's going into his senior year, so he'll have 1 season of eligibility remaining. And, what's interesting about this one is there is a connection here to Florida State. Jeremiah Wilson signed with Syracuse in 2022 when Tony White was the defensive coordinator for the Orange, and Tony White was actually his primary recruiter out of high school. So he played in that defense under White in 2022, and then obviously White departed for Nebraska in 2023. Wilson stuck around at Syracuse for the 2023 season and then transferred to Houston for this past season. And one thing about him is he's got a ton of experience playing in this 3-3-5 defensive scheme. Seems like he would be an excellent fit for Florida State, especially coming into a roster, a defensive backfield that doesn't really have a lot of guys with game experience in this system. And, for a defensive backfield that has a lot of talent, but maybe not necessarily a ton of experience out there in that cornerback room, he would be a solid option for Florida State to add ahead of the 2025 season. I think another thing worth noting is he's actually from the state of Florida. So, I mean, this would be a little bit of a homecoming for him, a chance to reunite with Tony White in Tallahassee. And I think with Florida State getting him on campus, there's probably a good chance here that the Seminoles could land him, but unsure if he's got plans to take other visits after FSU.
Yeah, this would be big if they could get him in, because like I mentioned a few weeks ago, we like the talent that's in this cornerback room, but there's just not a lot of proven talent. And Jeremiah Wilson is one of the 10 best corners in college football last year, according to PFF. Had 4 interceptions, 5 pass breakups, only allowed 17 catches for 260 yards last season. Yeah, he did a great job last season at Houston. He was arguably the only good player on defense for Houston last year. But Florida State needs experienced talent in that secondary right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more experience. It's just screams experience. And like, Florida State, Quindarius Jones, the guy that I didn't hear a whole ton of spring from, but, too, with I try to say iron sharpens iron, but who did he have a chance to go against unless it was some guys that didn't have a whole ton of experience beforehand? Just, I'm interested to see what Florida State is able to do with Coach Surtain. And if I was going to lean away, Coach Surtain usually picks up some guys, and this would be a solid pickup there for that room to add someone not just with experience, but probably get a lot of playing time in 2025.
And Austin kind of noted it, but I mean, this guy is a ball hawk. The 4 interceptions in 2024. He had a pick the previous season. 2 interceptions returned for touchdowns in the last 2 seasons, and that's something Florida State could obviously use after the inability to force turnovers last season.
Gonna need turnovers this year. Like I was just saying, with this offense. Going to need every which way, shape, or form to get the ball away from on Tony White's defense. All right, let's jump over to the NFL draft, and then we also do have some basketball latest from VZ. But there is a big-time draft happening beginning tomorrow evening, and it's not going to be as busy and crazy as it was last year for Florida State. A lot of those guys getting drafted had phenomenal first years in the NFL. Shout out Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, also to Jarian Jones, Renardo Green over there with the 49ers as well. Keon Coleman with Josh Allen. There's a lot. Trey Benson's going to get a lot of more burn, I would expect, going into this next season, as long as, although if James Conner plays the way that he does, seems like he's seeing a little turnaround there in his career, former Steeler running back, but still got a lot of years ahead for Trey Benson and his young career in the NFL. But we've got a couple Noles here that we're projecting for Florida State to get drafted. And I thought I'd go through a couple, just really mainly just one main mock draft where Florida State had 2 guys in it. And this is coming from ESPN's Jordan Reed. We'll start off with AZ. He has him going in the 2nd round to the Atlanta Falcons with the 46th pick. In his quote, he says, Thomas is a true press man corner who allowed only 1 completion on 10-plus yard throws in 2024, the fewest among Power 4 cornerbacks. He had only 2 college interceptions, but has shown an ability to get his hands on the ball and could play immediately in Atlanta for the Falcons. So going over there to the NFC South. What do y'all think about that pick and selection there? Because it feels like that's most likely that range of where Thomas is going to go. I'm projecting there, and that probably in the first 15 picks of the 2nd round draft happening on Friday evening.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, obviously he was earning that 1st round buzz for a while, but I mean, this is a pretty deep draft at cornerback. I mean, there's some really intriguing prospects there in that 1st round to 2nd round range. And, AZ kind of hurt himself a little bit at Florida State's pro day with that 4.58 40-yard dash. I think that's going to cause him to slip a little bit out of the 1st round, but I definitely do think he should be off the board by number 50.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only 2 visits that we know he took are with the Bucs and the Steelers. The Steelers don't even have a 2nd round pick, so they don't seem like a likely destination unless they either trade back from 21, which Logan might lose his mind at if they do, or trade up from the 3rd round, which it would cost a lot to do that. Whereas the Bucks pick at 53rd, I wouldn't be too surprised to see him go there. Some other teams that make sense. Atlanta definitely makes sense. The Bengals make sense. The Dolphins make sense. There's a lot of teams in that mid 40 to 50 range that would make a ton of sense for AZ.
Gets very interesting too, because Miami, there's been some chatter about, shopping or doing some stuff with Jalen Ramsey as well.
Minnesota
So,
Vikings, please.
yeah. So it could be making a replacement there and then going over, like you said, to the Bucks as well. I was talking about him. It's funny. I'm talking about Jamel Dean. There's been a strong message from one Buck and the facility there, from Jason Light and Todd Bowles through, NFL owners meetings and also to the NFL Combine, that health, got to stay healthy. There's a reason why they moved on from Carlton Davis. He went over there to Detroit Lions. Now he's done with the Detroit Lions. He's over with the Patriots, just cannot stay healthy for a full season. That's something that Jamel Dean has always dealt with as well. So there's certainly an opportunity there for the Buccaneers too. And then let's jump over to another Nole. Jordan Reed also predicts for Joshua Farmer. This guy is going to be likely, I would think, in this 3rd, 4th round range, but in this specific mock itself has him going as the 68th pick in the 3rd round to the Las Vegas Raiders, joining Pete Carroll over there. Also to a handful. Well, no, actually, J-Rob is no longer. Where'd J-Rob go?
He's on the Cardinals.
Cardinals.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, wait.
Josh
Janarius or
Cardinals.
Jamie
Yeah.
Robinson?
Janarius is with the Chiefs.
Yeah, he's with the Chiefs.
Yeah. But in the quote here, he says, Farmer has the potential to be an early starter at one technique alongside Christian Wilkins, former Clemson defensive tackle. He is stout against the run and can generate some excitement as a pass rusher. And I think that kind of explains him pretty decently well, because if he gets his one-on-one opportunities, we've seen it before, he can really bull rush and get to the backfield. Having 2 guys on him, though, puts him in more of a limited situation to use his talents. But this would be going to a team that are putting a lot of work in. They're hoping to find, their future there at quarterback as well. Got a new head coach coming in. And honestly, you got Tom Brady now as a minority owner. They're trying to get a lot of buzz there. They've got a star, one of the top pass rushers, one of the top players in the league with Max Crosby. So pretty decent tandem there. And we saw where a lot of those guys on the inside and also to vice versa on the outside, like Jared Verse, working off each other with Braden Fisk, getting a strong defensive line. I think a lot of teams are looking at what the success that the Eagles have had the last few years and trying to maybe punch that in. But what do y'all think about, where Farmer might go this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, I think this is another position where, there's just a ton of talent and depth there along that interior defensive line. And also off the edge going into this draft. So I was a little interested a couple months ago. I think it was before the Combine, where we had one of those mock drafts come out. And they had Josh Farmer as a projected 1st round pick to the Rams. And I'm like, whoa, what is going on here? And I think things have kind of stabilized themselves a little bit over the last couple of weeks, with teams able to get more data from his performance at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine, and, with what he did at Florida State's Pro Day, which was obviously very little standing on what he decided or his times that he had during the athletic testing portion of the NFL Combine. But yeah, like you guys have kind of said, that 3rd, 4th round makes sense. I think he will certainly be a top 100 pick.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's visited with the Patriots, the Giants, and the Steelers again. Logan's just over here as giddy as can be. He also met with the Bills for sure at the Combine. I'm sure he met with a bunch of other teams at the Combine too. But yeah, that 3rd round range seems about right. The Giants have 2 picks in the 3rd round, 65 and 99. They also pick again in the top of the 4th at 105. The Steelers have 83. The Patriots have 69. And the Bills, they don't pick in the 3rd round, I don't think. But they do pick at the end of the 2nd round at 62, so they could trade back right in that range for Farmer. 3rd round definitely seems about where he's going to end up.
Just going to the NFL draft, though, what are we feeling here? I think it's going to be a fun draft because, of course, you've got some big names with Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, and trying to figure out where those guys go. And Cam Ward seems to be that lock there to the Tennessee Titans. I was there for that combine, and that's all that the Titans were doing was discussing with him during his workouts. But, there's some teams, too, that I think are going to get aggressive, and it's going to be very interesting to see also, too, like teams like, Liam Cohen just went to the Jaguars. Could they jump up and grab a running back, a game-changing running back that they've been looking for a good long while, and with Ashton Genty? What do y'all think? I mean, then you look at the quarterbacks, too, and, we got a lot of buzz from Jackson Dart. Interested to see how quickly a team will grab him. What are y'all's biggest storylines you are keeping a close eye on?
I don't know. I'm not as well versed into this as you two guys, but I would say the main thing for me, I'm keeping on what the Buccaneers and the Commanders are going to do. Seems like, we could potentially see them both trade out of the first round, try and pick up some more assets. I know the Commanders, have thinned out a little bit with their draft picks due to some of those trades they've made. And, you have to think if they're able to trade back into that second round and acquire some extra picks, that's something that they might want to try and do just to continue filling out for the future. And then same thing but with the Buccaneers, is the right guy going to be there that Jason Light wants to go and grab, or do they want to trade back and nab someone in that second round? And that's something he's done over the past couple of years since we've been covering the team over there at Bucks Game Day. He's a guy that'll shake things up on draft day when you're not expecting it.
Yeah, this is going to be, I think, as wild as of an NFL draft as we've seen in a while, just because it's a lot of people have the opinion that the talent difference between the 11th pick and the 30th pick is very minimal. So you're going to see a lot of teams shuffling up and down to get the guys that they really think are worth that pick. And the Steelers are going to become a major player because if they don't select Shedeur or Jackson Dart or whoever, those teams at the top of the second, like Cleveland, the Giants, potentially the Raiders, the Saints, they're going to be fighting with these teams in the 20s trying to trade up and maybe get one of those quarterbacks. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun, definitely first round. And hopefully the Vikings trade out of the first round is what I'm hoping they do. But we'll see.
Yeah. I think, too, the wide receiver room, looking at that, it's got some good talent in the running back room across the board. It's like a Swiss Army knife almost. But then, too, wide receiver, I don't think there's a crazy amount of talent in this year's draft. Yeah. There's a few guys I keep a close eye on, but it's not a game changer like we've seen in years past. So I'm interested to see for those top two guys that I think could be game changers for you, how quickly some teams might jump up to grab that, as we've seen how important some wide receivers are. But back in the day, that wasn't the case. But, we're seeing to where, feeding your guys like a Jaden Daniels, some of these younger guys with some talent around you, teams will take that chance. But it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be great. Like Dustin was just saying there, we have Bucks Game Day. So if you're a Bucks fan, we'll have tons of content going there. And also, too, we cover the Commanders as well. commandersgameday.com. But we'll have full kind of coverage for you from FSU side on that at NoleGameday.com. So make sure you all stay tuned to that. We'll finish off, though, real quick with some basketball latest. VZ, what you got for us with Luke Laux and company?
Yeah, not too much. I can't remember if we talked about Cam Miles last week committing from IMG Academy. Freshman guard, 6'3", out of Orlando. Should be a good depth piece at least, but I imagine he redshirts his first season. The bigger one was getting Martin Somerville, transfer from UMass Lowell Mass legend, just like Terrence Mann. Visited BYU first, ended up making his way to Tallahassee and committed to the Seminoles soon after. Was the American East Rookie of the Year last year. Shot over 40% from three, 13 points per game as a freshman. Should be a good reserve piece, especially as a shooter off the bench. Can play either guard spot at the 1 or the 2. Florida State's roster now to 10 pieces, and depending on how this how settlement goes, they could still potentially have 5 spots to fill. We saw them reach out to former player Baba Miller yesterday, which could be interesting to see if that comes to any kind of fruition, because Miller had a pretty good season with FAU. Really bounced back with his 3-point shot and his free throw shooting. The same positional versatility on defense is still there. And as long as that offense continues to grow, he's going to be a perfect fit. And the NBA kind of system that Laux wants to run The only other two things I know are some small staff moves. Not even really small staff moves. Getting Jim Morin as the associate head coach. He was with Laux with the Sacramento Kings, was with Chris Kent with the Rip City Remix in the G League. So he's got connections with these guys. This is going to be his first opportunity as a coach in college. So I'm curious to see how that goes, especially with him being an associate head coach. But a guy that has that kind of experience where he was the head coach of a G League team, it's going to be closer connected to some of those younger guys. That's going to be big. And then bringing back a couple former Seminoles to round out this staff, Justin Lindner, who was a walk-on for Florida State for 5 or 6 years, including when I was there. He's coming back as assistant director of player development. I think that's an awesome fit. He was an assistant coach at Mercyhurst last season. He's wanted to get into player development and coaching. That's all he's done since he graduated. I love that fit. And then director of ops, Perrin Foote, my guy. I was a manager with him at Florida State. He followed Coach Gates to be a GA at Cleveland State, followed him again to be player development at Missouri, and I'm an assistant coach at VMI last year, who has former Florida State player Andrew Wilson as its head coach. So he's back as the director of ops. Super happy for both those guys. I love Justin. I love Perrin. Both those guys are awesome guys. And the staff is pretty much filled out. We're still waiting on the strength coach to be finalized, but it sounds like they have who they're at least looking for. And then the general manager is a wait and see. Last I heard, they're not too sure if that'll be a position for this season or not.
Shoot, you could have just applied, man. He's hiring everybody that was with him.
I know. They've hired 3 guys that I worked with. It's pretty cool. I'm happy for all those guys, really.
Yeah. And Linder, I remember him. Wasn't he one of the group? Were they the White Vipers back
No,
in the day?
Green Vipers. Green Team Vipers.
White Vipers.
That's crazy. The Green Vipers. I mean, that scout team was a huge reason why that team was so successful, because those walk-ons were super smart players. With him, Harrison Prieto, Will Miles, Travis Light, all those guys were super smart, and a big reason why those teams were so good, because they just knew how to run the other team's systems, and they got it like that and got the teams prepared.
Absolutely. Well, good stuff there. That's the roundup there on the basketball side for Luke Laux and company. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Hear the Spirit. Like I was just saying, got tons of coverage for you guys over there at NoleGameday.com throughout the transfer portal stuff, the buzz going there, visits, incoming, recruiting, and also to the NFL draft beginning tomorrow night. Should be a fun one. We'll be here live next week for you guys in another afternoon show. We'll most likely go back like a little bit at the spring, and I'm sure we'll have a ton to discuss in the transfer portal as well. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's week and weekend ahead. Thanks so much for tuning in with us. Shout out to the White Vipers, and we'll talk to you guys next week on Hear the Spirit. Peace.